Hello, everybody. Welcome to another event of PMI Greece community. This is the fourth event for 2023. Today, we're really honored to have with us Erik Rueter. It's a good friend of PMI community. Personally, had the privilege to meet him in person in US. So I'm really looking forward about this presentation. Actually, to be honest, I have a sneak peek of what we're going to hear. And Zirona, can you please elaborate more about who's
Absolutely.
Erik? All right, great.
So hello everyone, I'm Zinanas. I'm the youngest member in the events team. And today, as you already know, we have Erik Rueter. Erik has a diverse career span roles in technology startups, academia, healthcare and marketing, including his current position as a senior project manager at the American Marketing Association. Also, with a unique educational background encompassing neuroscience, digital designs, Irish studies, design thinking, and of course, diversity and inclusion. He has contributed to oncology nursing research, lectured at colleges, and has spoken at various organizations about the topic of today, which is diversity and inclusion in project management teams. So, without further ado, Mr. Erik Rueter, you can start.
Great, so let me share my screen and we will get started. Sorry, I'm trying to do this also with a dog on my lap because my pets do not let me sit at my desk without being in my lap. So thank you all, first off, for having me here today. I'm very excited to be here and to share with you about how you can use design thinking, which is also known as human-centered design, to enable engagement and inclusivity on your project teams. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is what you're going to learn through the course of the next hour or so. So you will be able to, by the end of this presentation, if I do my job correctly, articulate the benefits of engagement and inclusion for your project teams, be able to distinguish between diversity and inclusion because they are two separate but related issues, be able to come up with a business case for why human-centered design is important on projects, and you're going to be able to explain a new concept of servant leadership, which I term SLOS, and how it connects with human-centered design to enable engagement and inclusivity, and give you some opportunities to integrate real-world examples of these into your projects. So the agenda for today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. We're going to talk about the concept of engagement, talk about diversity and inclusion, what that means, how it evidences itself on projects, talk about human-centered design, what it is, how you can use it. Then we're going to put all of those three previous topics together. And then in the wrap-up, we're going to talk about how you can actually implement these in your practice. So, as they said in my intro, I have a pretty varied background. So I spent almost 20 years doing marketing and communications before I switched into a more pure project management role. I have had my PMP, however, since 2013, and I've had my PMI ACP since 2019. You can see I've got a whole bunch of different educational experiences as well, all over the board. I get bored easily, so I like to try new things, try new concepts. So why am I particularly talking to you about inclusion and diversity? Well, I have a vested interest in it. I like engaging workplaces. I want to make the world a better place for everyone involved, and I am a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, and I am bipolar. I have a managed mental health condition. So there are a number of different ways in which inclusion and diversity are really important to me personally, as well as professionally. So first off, I said we were going to talk about engagement. So I do have a question for you. And that question is, if my slides will work correctly, there we go. How do you feel on an average Sunday night? Are you looking forward to another awesome week at work? Do you have that pit in the bottom of your stomach because you are so tense and not wanting to do your work, not wanting to go into the office or log in? Or are you just kind of like, it's another day, I'll get through it? So if you want, you can drop your answers into the chat box. Sorry, I am going to stop my slideshow for a second. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of...
No worries, Eric. You can just see a chat box full of A's. We just have a C. So I don't know what that means, right? Either we are on really good workplaces or we're not that honest, something between.
And
right.
Honestly, that's, pretty average in the US. Actually, I get a lot of B's. So
yeah, there are some B's right now. There are some B's.
Yeah,
You know.
I'm also a B.
All right. So there we go. Now I got it right. Now I can actually see the chat as well as my screen. So if you answered either B or C, what you're looking at is disengagement. So you are looking at these attributes, whether it's in yourself or if you have a coworker who is disengaged, you're seeing they're apathetic, they're phoning it in, they're just going and doing the least amount of work necessary to keep their jobs. They don't have a lot of good connections with their coworkers, and you don't feel comfortable actually sharing anything about yourself personally with your coworkers. So you just come in, you put on the professional mask, you get through the day, and you leave. So why should you care about this as project managers? You're not in human resources. Why should you care about this? First off, if you're a PMI member, whether you realized it or not, you have signed off on the code of ethics. The minute you sent in your payment, you signed off on this. And part of this is that you have agreed to be respectful and to be good shepherds of the resources in your care. And those resources on your project include the people. And you want to create an environment where people feel confident, they can perform, they can cooperate, and where diverse perspectives and views are encouraged and valued. So these are the reasons why you should care about whether people on your team and yourself are engaged with your work. So what happens when you're engaged? How do we get to engaged? So there are 3 key attributes to employee engagement. And these are psychological availability, psychological meaningfulness of the work, and psychological safety. So availability means your ability to concentrate and be present to connect with the work that you're doing. So I had an experience when I was first starting out in the working world where a car thief came into the building I was working in and almost took some of us hostage. The police thankfully came in and, captured the guy before anything really bad happened. But I became continually worried about that kind of situation occurring again. So every time I went into the building, I became nervous. I wasn't concentrating on my work. And my supervisor pulled me aside a month after and goes, you were doing really well at your work until about a month ago, and I don't know what happened. Well, I do. I was worried all the time. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I was making mistakes. I was not engaged in my work. Meaningfulness is, do we see that our work is providing value to other people? Is it making an impact? And another personal anecdote, I had a job in college where I was working in a botany lab, and my job was literally to count seeds and to make little packets of 25 seeds. And again, I didn't really see how this was meaningful. The experiment that it was related to was not going to be completed for another 5 to 10 years. So didn't really see how it was meaningful. And again, was disengaged, did the bare minimum, not my greatest work performance. Psychological safety is whether you feel like you are able to contribute without judgment, without fear of retribution, without having people steal your ideas. So I had a coworker and we both reported to the same new manager. So he had just come into the organization and my colleague and I were direct reports to him. And I had a pretty decent experience with him, with the new manager. And my coworker came up to me one day and she said, I cannot stand working for this guy. And I couldn't understand why until she said, watch how he treats me in meetings. And what I noticed was that she would try to present an idea. He would interrupt her. He would start talking over her. If another coworker who was a man presented the same idea that she had, it would be an amazing idea. It would be great. It was wonderful. But if my female coworker had presented it, he would ignore it. So she didn't feel safe putting forward new ideas or offering solutions because those ideas either she would be talked over or those ideas would be stolen from her. So she was not safe in that work environment. And it wasn't physical safety, it was psychological safety. So if you have psychological safety, meaningfulness, and availability, you're going to see these attributes, whether in yourself or in your coworkers, if they have those three attributes. So you're going to see people who are optimistic, they want to work together on teams, they put in the extra effort and they share the credit for successes, but they also accept the blame for when something goes wrong, and they look to how they can learn from it. So I do want to point out, though, that engagement is different than satisfaction. So you can be satisfied with your job, but not particularly engaged with it, because satisfaction relates more to the benefits that you have, how many vacation days, whether you're in person or remote. So that is different than engagement. So I have certainly had jobs where I'm satisfied with them, but I am definitely just doing the minimum to get by. So you don't want satisfaction in and of itself. You want satisfaction and engagement. And why do you want engagement? What is the real benefit of having people who are engaged with their work? So this is just one statistic, and I could give you statistics all day long. We could take 12, 24 hours, and I could just keep giving you statistics. I'm not going to do that. This is just one. This is an example of one statistic. When you have people who are engaged on your team, you're going to have greater profitability and greater productivity. You also, and this is just one other statistic, if you have engaged employees, you can reduce absenteeism by up to 41%. So having engaged team members, greater profitability, higher productivity, less missed days of work. So all really amazing benefits that you want to bring to your projects. So what does this have to do with diversity and inclusion? So my next question for the group is, would you feel comfortable getting footloose and fancy-free and dancing with your coworkers at a company party? So A, B, or C in the chat. So a lot of A's right now, some B's. So what I'm really getting to with this question is the difference between diversity and inclusion. So diversity is a group of people who are different occupying the same space, and that can be a physical space or a remote space. So right now we're occupying the same Teams meeting, so we are in the same space. Inclusion, however, is a group of people who are different occupying the same space where their differences are not only recognized, but recognized as valuable, and they feel safe enough to contribute to the work. Now, inclusion leads to belonging, and belonging is where you feel safe, comfortable, you're a part of the team, and that's when you're going to start dancing with people because you're not scared of judgment. You know that it's great. People are going to support you no matter how you dance compared to them. So that's the difference between diversity inclusion and inclusion related to belonging. So one of the things that occurs when you have diversity in the workforce is marginalization. And marginalization is when people are excluded from resources because of their identity. And resources can be social resources, economic, physical, psychological, whatever, but they are excluded. And this can manifest in a lot of different ways. And oftentimes it's what we refer to as structural discrimination. And this is where the discrimination is embedded in the systems of an organization. So one example of this is the gender wage gap. So in the US, according to Business Insider in 2020, women made 83 cents compared to the dollar that men made for the exact same type of work. So it's not that, you know, one particular person is saying, I'm only going to pay women 83 cents per dollar. It's that the organization is set up in a way that that is okay to do again and again and again. You also have interpersonal acts of discrimination. So you may or may not have heard the term microaggressions. Microaggressions are very subtle, sometimes they're indirect acts of discrimination. So this is telling a joke that uses stereotypes, or in the US, this is something that happens a lot. If you have a person of color, somebody may say, oh, well, you're really articulate, as if English was not their first language. So there's a lot of different ways that discrimination can manifest in the workplace. One example of this, as I said, I'm a member of the LGBTQIA community. I was talking to a coworker once. I mentioned my husband in passing, and that person asked me which one of us was the man and which was the woman in the relationship. And that plays into homophobia, that plays into gender discrimination. So there are a lot of different ways that that question was very discriminatory. So there are other ways that discrimination and marginalization can evidence themselves in a workforce. So, and on project teams. Identity threat is one. I told you that story about my coworker who was talked over, had her ideas stolen. She was experiencing identity threat because she was a woman. Her ideas were stolen. She felt devalued. She felt like her identity as a woman was the cause of all of those negative actions towards her. So because of her identity, she was threatened. Tokenism is equally bad, but a very different type of issue that you're going to encounter. And this is where someone who is of a marginalized identity is asked to represent everyone in that marginalized identity. So in my case, I worked at this one organization and I kept getting asked to sit on a social committee, be on a hiring committee, do this other extracurricular activity for work. And what I realized was that I was not being asked because of my expertise. I was being asked because I was a member of the LGBTQIA community. And it was me and one South Asian woman who were on all of these same things together because we were the only two members of marginalized groups. So we kept getting asked to do all of these extra things, and our day-to-day tasks were suffering because we kept getting pulled into all of these other activities. And then my supervisor was asking me why I was not hitting my goals, why I was not performing as well as I could be. And it was because I kept getting asked to do all of these extra things and was expected to because of my identity. So why do we want diversity and inclusion, the combo pack of those two things together? And I swear that was the last really down, negative thing I'm going to talk about. So when you have diversity and inclusion together in your project, in your workplace, you are going to see better decisions made. You're going to see more innovation. You're going to see better financial outcomes for your project. And these are just a few of the benefits. And to put a fine point on it and to give you a number to put with this is from a 2022 study that showed that the most diverse companies outperform the least diverse by 36%. And that's just looking at racial and ethnic diversity. So if you have people who are bringing different life experiences, different perspectives, different identities to a team, you are going to get different angles that they're looking at problems from. And they're going to be able to provide solutions that one single group may not be able to provide because they are only looking at it from one perspective. So that's the benefit of having a diverse team where people feel included and can speak up and tell others what their ideas are. So now we're going to move on to human-centered design. So human-centered design is a methodology that has its basis with the concept of empathy. So you want to really fully understand the challenge that your end user is facing, and you want to build your solution based on their challenge, their input. What are their pain points? What are their preferences? And you move through these different steps. So you empathize with them. Then you really work to succinctly state what their problem is. Then you generate a lot of different ideas, different ways that you can solve that problem and get rid of that pain point. Then you build an in real life prototype of it, and then you test it, and you see what works, what doesn't, and you go through these steps. Now, I made it look like it's a really smooth and clear, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. process. But in reality, it looks more like this. You are bouncing back and forth between all of these different stages. But the thing that is common to all of them is you are involving the end user in every one of these steps. You are putting a human in the center of the design process. So that is why human-centered design creates such amazing products, services, or results, is because you are maintaining that connection to the people who are using or will be using the end product. And it does this in a number of different ways. So human-centered design creates these permanent trackable artifacts. So you have records of how the solution was created as part of creating the solution. So you can go back, you can say, oh, Erik submitted that idea, or Jane submitted that idea. So you can see the evolution. Human-centered design is also solutions-oriented. I don't know if you have ever had this experience, but I have gone to meetings where people just talk and talk and talk and talk, and it becomes just, what's wrong with this? Oh, it's so awful, it's terrible, this project is the worst, and nothing gets solved. When you use human-centered design, every meeting, every convening of people is focused on creating something that will move the project forward. It also invites cross-functional teams, so you do want different people from different functional areas of your organization to participate. So you want someone from human resources, you want someone from your technology department, you want someone from your marketing department, because they are all going to bring those different perspectives to the project, to the activities. It's also really low cost. There's a ton of different free whiteboarding softwares out there. You can use Google Drive. So really easy to get people involved with. And because of its nature, you can do it co-located, you can do it virtually, really easy to do. And, they help remove, these activities help remove privilege from the process. So people can participate from where they are. And what this ends up looking like is this double diamond model. So you frame the problem, you explore it, you have some initial ideas for how you're going to solve it, you refine the idea, start building out the prototype, it sort of expands a bit more, you test it out, you figure out what works, what doesn't, it starts combining it, and then you have a much more solid prototype, and you keep going through these diamonds. And we use this to actually help build a better PMO where I work. So we decided we were going to do a human-centered design sprint. And I know you can't see all of this. It's, but I just wanted to show you that there were a lot of different steps that we went through, and we created a very clear goal. We wanted to create immediately actionable and implementable solutions so that we could increase engagement with our project teams. And we went from people telling our bosses that they didn't want to work with us because we were just another level of bureaucracy, project managers, oh, they just make things so much more complicated. We don't understand why they're making us do all of these activities, to now having more requests for project managers than we have project managers to assign to projects. So because we invited our end users into the process, we were able to create solutions that they wanted to use. What this ends up looking like in numbers is this. So this is from IBM from 2018. They saw that by implementing human-centered design practices, they had a 301% return on investment. And because they could do projects faster with less failure points, they saved $20.6 million. It's just incredible numbers that you're looking at here from a single methodology. And there are other benefits too. So you have the improved ROI, which I just showed you, but you also have increased innovation. You have better customer relations because the customers feel like their opinion is valued and matters. It's exactly what I just said about our project management office. We view our project team members as our customers. They felt like their ideas were valued. And you have enhanced team engagement. So a lot of different benefits from using human-centered design on your projects. So we've had 3 very different concepts. Sorry about the dogs. Can't really always control them. 3 very different concepts. We're going to put them all together now. So if you've been paying attention, you've seen there's a lot of different commonalities in these different concepts. With inclusion, you've got better financial outcomes, better decisions, increased innovations. Oh, with engagement, you also have superior financial outcomes. And with human-centered design. So there's a lot of overlap between these 3 different concepts that we're talking about. And it's that sweet spot. It's that spot in the middle where they all overlap that you, as a project leader, you want to live in that spot and you want to have your teams in that spot. So how do you get there? How do you do this? So this is the concept of servant leadership as a service. And this is where you're treating your team like they're your customers and you're putting them at the center of what you're doing. And this is going to increase your engagement. It's going to increase people feeling included. So what does that mean though? How do you get there? So just to level set, servant leader, just a refresher. So if you are a successful servant leader, if you are putting your team members up front and serving their needs, they're going to grow as people, they are going to be healthier, they're going to be more autonomous, they're more likely to help other people, and the least privileged members of society or your project team are going to benefit and be able to contribute at a higher level. Now, the pitfall of servant leadership, and I have certainly fallen into this myself, is that you can assume that what you would need to be successful is what the people on your team need to be successful. So that's the golden rule. You're treating others the way that you would like to be treated. What you want to do is use the platinum rule, which is treat other people the way that they want to be treated. I grew up playing team sports, and I had coaches who would just yell at us and tell us how awful we were and how terrible we were at playing football. And it made me shut down. Other people on the teams, that motivated them. That made them want to play harder. Me, I was like, well, if you're telling me I'm terrible, I'm not even going to try. So it was a very different way of motivation. And that's the pitfall that, I mean, that's a very different kind of example, but it's similar to how servant leaders can sometimes fail in their leadership. So another question for you. How many of you have managers who really understand where you're coming from? You know, your manager A totally gets you. You're like twins. You can read each other's minds. B, they have no idea. They do not understand you at all. Or C, sometimes like if you really take the time and you explain it, you know, point by point, maybe they'll get it. So I see a B, I see a C. Yeah, so, you know, those of you who are putting A, wow, keep those managers. You know, they are very rare in the working world. But what they're doing most likely, I can't speak for all of you, but what they're doing most likely is empathizing with your situation. So what does empathy have to do with this? I know we talked a little bit about it when we were talking about human-centered design, but there are a lot of benefits to being an empathetic leader or having an empathetic leader. So again, you're going to see more innovation. You are going to see people staying at their jobs, not leaving their jobs. Inclusivity is improved, which has all of the benefits that we talked about before, better engagement, better work-life balance. So those are a lot of different benefits if you have an empathetic leader. So again, how do you get there? How do you become an empathetic leader? So I'm sure many, if not all of you, have heard software as a service. You know, this is where, you know, you've got a piece of software that you do not have the physical version of it. It lives on the cloud. It can be customized to your needs, can integrate with different stuff that you have, different programs. It integrates with your financial software, with your marketing software, your customer relations software. The features can be delivered quickly. You don't have to go out, buy another version of it, and then install it. It's just updated automatically, open, and usually there's a community of practice around it. There's forums where you can go on, get advice for how to use it, all of those things. You can do the same things with servant leadership. And if you view servant leadership as a service that you are providing to your teams, you are going to be able to customize how you lead the individuals on your team. You're going to be able to gain cross-functional insights on the service of leadership that you are providing. You are going to be able to change your leadership style much more quickly because you're getting feedback, and you're going to have a community of practice, and you're going to be able to collaborate and share. So I'm not going to read all of this to you. That would be torture for all of you and myself. But these are the different ways that those different attributes flow through human-centered design, engagement, and inclusivity. And this is recorded, so you'll be able to come back to the slide later if you want to. So I've given you a lot of information, but now we're in the home stretch. We're wrapping it up. And what you're going to see is that if you choose to pursue this idea of servant leadership as a service, if you choose to embed it into your project practice, you can use any number of different ways to do this. So if you have a fully co-located team, you can use sticky notes, whiteboards, markers, make sure your team's caffeinated, and go forward and use human-centered design. If you have a lot of resources, you can get very specific customized tools. You can use things like Miro, Lucidchart, Mural to participate if you have a virtual team. Or if you don't have a lot of resources, you can do a lot of these same activities in a Google slide. You can use SharePoint to do this. Lots of different ways to use human-centered design activities. So what are some of these activities? I've talked a lot about the theory, etc. What are the practicalities of this? So I'm going to show you a few different activities that you can use and point you to some resources that have a lot more activities that you can embed into your practice. So first activity is empathy mapping. So this is where you go through with your team and you say, who are you? What do you need to do? What are you seeing other people do when they're doing the same or similar tasks? What are they saying about the project, about the environment, the organization, etc.? What are they actually doing? So what we say we do and what we actually do sometimes do not align. So what are they actually doing? And what are they hearing other people say? And what are their pains and what are their hopes and aspirations? So this can help you pinpoint barriers. It can remove identity threat. It can remove tokenism because you're pulling this data from your entire team. You really do want to watch out for making sure that you ask for consent when you are building an empathy map. And if you do build an empathy map and you promise change based on it, make sure you follow through, because nothing ruins your credibility more than promising that things are going to get better and then they don't because you haven't done anything. So just make sure that you take forward steps after you do something like this. And this was the first step that we took when we did that human-centered design sprint to reinvigorate our project management office. We went to all of our key stakeholders and asked them all of those questions regarding the project management office. So it's a very good activity. If you want to find out more about it, there's a excuse me, a website called gamestorming.com. GAMESTORMING.com has a lot of different activities on there that you can pull. Another good one, and this is for virtual teams, though you can do this in person. There's a slightly different format for it if you do it in person. This is a creative matrix. So what you do is you give people a challenge. How might we get customers to early adopt? Then a mode. So how might we get them to early adopt using technology, digital media, etc., and then come up with a solution based on those two combinations of things. And you write down one idea per combination, and you end up with a lot of different ideas for how you can solve a problem. So very powerful when you need to generate a lot of different ideas. Now, this one, we use this in all of our check-in meetings where we're talking about project status. And this is a what's on your radar. So you have 4 quadrants. In this case, it was for an event that we were working on. So our quadrants were content, production, virtual, and a wild card. And then you have keep in mind, watch closely, and emergency. And people just literally write down things that they're thinking about, challenges they're encountering, and they rank them in the quadrants based on those 3 different levels. And then you have the opportunity to talk about it. And what this does is it really silences the loudest voice in the room, because I'm sure you've all been in meetings where there is one person who just is not afraid to talk and tell you everything that is going on in their world and minute detail, and no one else gets the opportunity to contribute. This silences that. This allows everyone to contribute because they're doing it silently, posting things up on this activity. Now, one thing that you need to watch out for is assuming that the emergency items need a lot of discussion. Sometimes there's a quick answer to those, but some of the things that are further out on the radar may require more in-depth discussion. And that's why we implemented a dot voting aspect to this too. So people got 3 dots. They put them on the ideas that they felt needed the most discussion. And so you can see in this example, there's some in the yellow and the green that needed more discussion than the emergency items. So what did you learn today? So hopefully you learned all of this different stuff. I realize it was a lot of information that I gave to you in a relatively short amount of time. I know we didn't really touch on that last thing on the integration. And what we're going to do now is I hope you have some sort of writing implement and something to write on, because we are actually going to do that virtual creative matrix together as a group. So you're going to have approximately 1 minute per mashup of ideas. And if you want to draw a picture, extra credit to you, that's awesome, but we're not going to see it. So I'm going to take your word whether you drew a picture or not. One idea, after we wrap up the session, put your ideas in the chat if you want to, and we can see how many ideas you have, what your ideas are, because other people in the group may learn from them. So here's my challenge. Here's the question for you. How might we create project teams that are as engaged and inclusive as the multinational performance teams at the Olympics opening ceremony? So that's my question to you. So the first one is, how can you do that using policies and procedures in your workplace? So think about incentives, rewards, training, guidelines. So think about that, write down an idea somewhere, and I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to do that. All right, so our next one is, how can you do that? How can you create engagement and inclusion on your project teams using an event or a program? So think about conferences, workshops, forums, different ways, virtual events. How can you make people feel welcome and like they can contribute using an event? All right, next one, using remote work tools. So video conferencing, intranets, whiteboards, departmental websites. How can you use those to make people feel included and engaged? And finally, how can you use servant leadership as a service to improve engagement and inclusion? All right. So my challenge to you is to use this concept of servant leadership as a service. Put your team members at the center. Think about them as customers to whom you are providing a product, a service. Incorporate some of these human-centered design activities that provide so much value and improve your return on investment. Incorporate them into the way that you lead your projects. Incorporate them into the way that you interact with your project team members. Test it out. See what works, what doesn't. Change, innovate, adapt. Get feedback from your project team members and rework it and try it again and implement it. And as project team leaders, you know the importance of data. So I highly encourage you to come up with some measures of success before you embark on this. It doesn't have to be anything that is going to take a lot of time. We implemented a quick survey at the end of our status update meetings where people put a smiley face, a neutral face, or a sad face as to how they felt about the project. Really simple, easy way to get data. So do something like that so you can see if this is working for you and refine it. And also remember, there's going to be things outside of your control. I know you know this as project managers. You can't control everything. There are things that are outside of your control. Don't let those stop you from trying to make your teams better, from trying to lead your teams better. And remember to be open and honest with your teams about the things that you can influence and change and what you can't. Because they need to know if they give you an idea and it is something that you cannot implement at all because of the way your company is set up or whatever, that it's not that you're not listening to them, that it's not that their input is not valuable, but that it's out of your control. And if you do all of this stuff, you are going to see changes in the way that your employees, that your project team members are collaborating. You are going to see the benefits of them being more engaged in the work. I cannot tell you what a difference this kind of methodology, these kind of concepts have made at my current workplace. As I said, we had people who were actively talking about how bad our project management office was, are the same people who are now coming to our project management office and asking for project managers, and we don't have enough of us to put on all of our projects. So it's very valuable. It can have an amazing impact on your organization. So that's everything that I have to say. Happy to field some questions. Talk about any of these concepts that you want to.
Yeah, so actually, I think we should really thank you, Eric. It was a really engaging and inclusive presentation that you did. Of course, if anyone has any questions, you can write on the chat and Eric would be happy to answer them. So maybe we should wait for a bit, or
Yeah.
what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to wait while people formulate questions.
Right. So, guys, if there's anybody has any kind of question, feel free. We have some minutes left before we end our session. And of course, thank you everybody for attending this event, and thank you for supporting our community. It's we couldn't have done this without you. And of course, Erik, thank you. It was so insightful, inspiring talk, and it's not some beautiful words. And I don't know. I focus on the practicalities and in all these beautiful notions. How can make it happen tomorrow in my everyday business, which is not just a beautiful story. It can happen. I don't know if it is a bit, some of these things may sound a bit far-fetched for our market, maybe, but I think that we should be more focused and see how can bring this value to our teams. So we have I think we have a comment, right? It's from Miriam. It says that I really believed in the benefit of HCD. However, on occasion, my supervisor has not believed in the cost benefit. Any recommendations?
Yeah, basically, as you said, small steps. So it took me a while to convince our leadership to actually go through an entire design sprint about the PMO. But I had implemented the radar activity prior, and people had started talking about how meetings seemed more focused than they had before. And then I implemented another activity. And so people started seeing the benefits of individual activities that I was putting into our cadence of regular workshops and meetings. And that allowed me to make the argument that doing a intensive multi-day workshop where we really looked at the project management office, it made leadership actually say, hey, this might be worth the time and effort. So you don't have to spend a lot of time or energy or money implementing some of these smaller activities. And if you can show the benefit of the smaller activities, then you can start implementing more and more of them. So it's that incremental change is, at least in my experience, the better way to approach it. Because if you try to make a massive change all at once, a lot of people are going to be really unhappy and push back, and it's not going to go well. So again, those small changes, implement one activity here, another there, really can have a huge benefit for you and your project teams.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erik.
And if any of you think of any other questions or comments, want to start a discussion, you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. I just dropped my LinkedIn profile into the chat. That is the only social media platform that I actually use anymore. So feel free to hit me up there. And I will talk about this all day long, every day. So
Thank you so much, Erik. Thank you so much for your time. We highly appreciate. Thank you everybody for coming here today, and thank you for your support. So let's keep in touch with our next event. Shortly, you'll receive our news about the event we're going to have on April. So once again, thank you and have a great evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.